Welcome back, everyone. Today's summary tells the story of a man who travels with his family to Mexico to inspect an oil rig, only to find it abandoned and under attack by a vicious shark. As the rig begins to sink and the shark closes in, he fights to save his family and survive. Will he make it out alive? Let's find out. The movie starts in a tourist city in Mexico, where two divers are working for an oil company. We learn that they're on a mission to blow up a newly discovered underwater oil well. One of the divers goes down to plant the explosives that'll detonate the well, but suddenly, a giant shark attacks and eats him. Right after, the shark surfaces and kills the second diver too. A few months later, we see an oil engineer named Paul heading to that same tourist city to spend his vacation with his wife and kids. His wife, Inez, is of Mexican descent, and she and Paul used to come to this city every summer for vacation. But unlike before, Inez notices that the city feels unusually quiet, and there are strange drawings on the walls of a god called Tlaloc, who the locals believe protects them from evil. Inez is surprised by the number of these drawings since they weren't there in previous years. When they arrive in the city, they stop in front of the hotel they used to stay at, only to find it completely abandoned, like no one's been there for years. Paul notices some people nearby and walks over to talk to them. One of them, named Early, speaks to Paul in a rough way and tells him that tourists stopped coming because they're afraid of the devil. He warns Paul about what might happen if he stays in the city. After that, Early agrees to take Paul and his family to a nearby restaurant. On the way, Early talks in a very strange and cryptic way, full of warnings about what Paul might experience in the city. But Paul doesn't really understand anything he's saying. Paul thanks Early for his help. Then Paul's son, Tommy, gives Early a small gift as a token of appreciation, and they part ways and head into the restaurant. While they're there, Paul gets a call from the oil company he works for. His boss asks him to go to a place nearby called Diamond D because they've lost contact with the workers there for a while. Paul tells his wife to stay put with the kids until he finishes the job. He kisses his daughter Audrey and son Tommy goodbye, then heads out. Before leaving the restaurant, he gives the waiter some money and asks him to look after his family. Then Paul goes to the beach and tells the guard he's an oil engineer and needs a boat to take him to Diamond D. The guard shows him where the boats are. After that, the guard goes back to his room holding a picture of Paul in his hand. He rips it up, then returns to his seat. When Paul reaches the shore, he asks a fisherman to take him to the place. During the ride, Paul asks the fisherman what happened to the city and why it changed so much. The fisherman tells him that the oil companies disturbed the devil, and that all of this was the devil's doing. Halfway through the trip, the fisherman tells Paul he can't go any further. Paul is confused by his behavior and doesn't understand what he means by the devil or why he's so scared. But Paul decides to continue the journey on his own. When Paul arrives, he sees a lot of bloodstains. As he walks toward the oil station, he finds that all the workers are gone. He's shocked by how quiet the place is and that there's no one around to explain what's going on. Suddenly, two armed men appear, clearly terrified. Paul calms them down and asks what's going on. One of them, named Chad, tells him that all the workers are dead and that the oil company cut off contact months ago without sending any rescue. Meanwhile, Tommy is at the restaurant with his mom and sister, totally immersed in the legend of Tlaloc, reading about it online. After learning the story, he tells his mom that he's noticed something strange. There aren't any birds around. Tommy says this could be a sign of the god's anger. After saying that, he tells his mom he's going to the bathroom. While he's gone, a strange man attacks Inez and her daughter and tries to assault them. Inez smashes a bottle on his head, knocking him down. She grabs her kids, and they run out of the restaurant. When they get to the car, they find someone has damaged it. So they run toward the beach as the attacker and his friends chase them. They jump into a boat heading to Diamond D, and Inez notices that even the fisherman is scared to go there, but she still doesn't understand why, or what's keeping him from going near Diamond. At the same time, Paul and the two guys with him hear the sound of the boat carrying Inez. Paul notices there's a shark following them, so Chad and his buddy Junior start making noise around the area to distract the shark and lead it away from Inez's boat. It actually works, and Inez makes it safely. But just as they're getting off the boat, Audrey falls into the water and sees dead bodies beneath the surface. She screams, terrified by what she just saw. Her dad quickly jumps in and pulls her out before the shark can get to her. Paul starts asking Chad about this shark, and Chad points at the boat that had guns on it. Suddenly, a giant shark jumps out of the water and eats the boat and the fishermen. At that point, Chad starts telling them about the legend of Tlaloc. He says there's an old myth that the tears of Tlaloc are what filled the stations with water, and that floods and earthquakes are signs of the god's anger. He explains that the reason for the god's rage is because humans have been exploiting living creatures and trying to wipe them out. Chad tells them the shark is actually the devil himself, and its mission is to destroy Diamond D and kill anyone who gets near the facility. He warns them not to go near the water in any way, because they could die at any moment. Then Paul starts checking with Chad and Junior all the equipment that's still functioning in the facility, trying to find some way to escape before they end up dead. They discover that one of the submarines is still intact, so Paul suggests they use it to go underwater and seal the oil well that's leaking, and disable the explosives planted down there. They hope this will calm the shark down and make it go away. But Inez gets angry when she hears the plan. She tells Paul he can't just leave her and the kids behind like that. Paul explains that it's the only way they can make it out alive. So Paul, Chad, and Junior agree that Chad and Junior will go first while Paul monitors everything from the control room cameras. Chad and Junior head down to the ocean floor, and Chad exits the submarine to try and seal the well. But he finds a large metal gate that's hard to break. He sets a bomb to blow it open. While doing this, Chad sees several bodies floating around him and gets freaked out. Suddenly, the shark swims right past him, and he panics and rushes back to the surface. At the same time, the shark attacks the submarine and kills Junior. Up on the surface, Paul sees Chad devastated by his friend's death. Paul apologizes to Chad, saying the whole idea was his. He admits he used to dislike Chad, but now he sees him as a friend and believes they're the only two who can save his family. While they're talking, Paul spots what looks like ships near the facility. He tries to fire a flare into the air to get their attention, but Chad tells him it's just an illusion, there are no ships out there. And sure enough, the ships disappear. Paul realizes he imagined them. Chad continues, saying these are all hallucinations caused by the devil, who's also controlling the shark. The devil's messing with their minds to scare them and take them out easily. But Paul isn't convinced. He doesn't believe in all that and thinks it's just folklore. Chad gets frustrated and argues with Paul for not believing him. He says the legend of Tlaloc isn't just some made-up tale. They invented it because they were scared, and when people get scared, they create things in their minds. Chad tells Paul if he keeps being stubborn and refusing to believe, he won't be able to save his family. The only way out is to work together. Paul finally agrees and shakes Chad's hand. They decide to help each other escape. Then, Paul and Chad head down to the ground floor of the facility to look for any way to seal the well. At that moment, Tommy was totally absorbed in the legend of Tlaloc. He grabbed a few of the little Tlaloc statues from the room, named each one after a member of his family, except for the one he called Tlaloc, and set them all in a small boat, letting it float off into the water. Suddenly, the statue named Tommy falls into the water, and Tommy freaks out, convinced it's a sign that he's going to die. He starts praying desperately, begging to keep himself and his family safe. Meanwhile, downstairs, Paul and Chad were hammering on a pipe to repair it, and the noise caught the shark's attention. Sure enough, the shark began pounding the building. The tremors shook the water, and in the commotion Tommy slipped in. At the same time, Inez had discovered some documents linked to the facility they were in. As she read them, she realized her husband Paul's signature was on the plans, and that he'd been one of the engineers who approved this project. Suddenly she understood that Paul's actions helped doom the town and turn the shark into this savage monster. She saw all this as divine punishment for what he'd signed off on. Audrey noticed Tommy was missing from their room, so she and Inez raced out to find him. They spotted him in the water, and Inez dove in to pull him out just before the shark could grab him. Paul rushed over to check on his son and tried to comfort Inez, but she screamed at him to stay away. She told him she'd read every page he'd signed and blamed him for their nightmare, saying if he hadn't taken part in that crime, none of this would have happened. Paul defended himself, saying he'd done it for a promotion, but she fired back that no career boost justifies destroying an entire town and unleashing a man-eating monster. She vowed to divorce him the moment they escaped. Their kids watched in shock as their parents argued. Paul tried to hide the real reason for the fight, but Inez broke the truth. Their dad knew this well could ruin the town, and he'd been one of the decision-makers who let it happen. Paul turned red with shame and stormed off to the lower level, where he talked with Chad about the oil company and the cursed well. He admitted that if he hadn't signed those papers, they'd have found someone else to do it, and now he felt betrayed, convinced the company knew about the monster and sent him here to get rid of him. Determined to expose them, Paul said he had a plan. He'd dive in alone and kill the shark with the bomb. Chad warned him he'd die if he went down there, but Paul was set on it. They went up to the second floor, found a small boat in the building, and with Audrey's help, got it fixed so his family could escape. Paul then asked Chad to help his wife and kids get out safely. Meanwhile, out on the island, Early met with a fisherman and told him no help could be sent to Paul's family. That would anger the god. He said Tlaloc demanded a soul be taken so the rest could live. Back at the facility, Paul said goodbye to Inez and the kids before plunging into the water, clutching the bomb Chad had planted at the well. Only minutes remained before it would detonate. Suddenly, the shark appeared. Paul dove into a nearby iron cage and, speaking to his family through the monitor, said he decided to kill the shark but wouldn't make it out alive. Then he intentionally let himself be swallowed. The bomb exploded inside the shark's belly, killing it and restoring everything to normal. On the surface, Early was waiting offshore in a boat to rescue Paul's family and bring them to safety. As they sped away, they watched the facility collapse from the explosion. Then, though it hadn't rained on the island for years, rain began to pour, and birds reappeared in the sky. Chad said it was proof the curse was lifted and the island would return to how it once was. And that's where the movie ends. If you enjoyed it, hit like and let us know your thoughts in the comments.